do to meet the needs of the aviation industry and the traveling public. Welcome to the Superpilotish channel. My name's Graham Wilson, and today I'm going to be talking about a possible solution to, well, a step in the right direction, anyways, to get rid of the little pilot shortage we have here in Canada in my basement. So, yeah, I was trying to figure out how to describe the aviation industry, and I started off with this little fish, but I'm going to get to that later. So yeah, I was listening the other day, and I'm glad that Dan and Jordan are in here too. I was listening the other day on CBC radio, and they were talking about how there's still an ongoing pilot shortage. I've seen that in the industry myself. It's been going on for a while. Even, geez, I would say I was really hard up to find employees all the way back, maybe 5-6 years ago. And yeah, it's all the baby boomers retiring. That's all there is. And so I'll kind of get into the aviation industry now. So here we go. We're going to call this the big guy, Air Canada. Here we go. There's the big fish, Air Canada. Now, the big fish has to eat up. We're eating pilots on the Superpilotish channel. So maybe there's a couple we'll get some other fish in here. Let's make a few medium fishes. I'm not exactly the greatest fish drawer. Maybe we'll do some WestJet. No, what do we got? Aircraft. All right, hang with me. I got a solution coming. Look at those terrible fish. Okay, we're going to go for 4 of them. Boom, 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 boom. Okay, now these represent the medium airlines. You know, something like Porter or, kind of a WestJet, Encore, Jazz. So there you go. So you need some pilots here, and Air Canada uses up the most amount of pilots, but they get them all from these guys here. And then those guys, oh boy, I'm gonna have to drill a whole bunch of fish. Okay, we're gonna say every little X is a fish because I can't really. Yeah, I can't. It'll take a long time for me to draw. I don't know, like 16 fish. Okay, here we go. Okay, we're gonna imagine that all these X's here are fishes. So this is, as you go through your career, the way it usually works is that you start off. You don't really have, you get your commercial pilot's license, maybe an instructor rating, and the instructor rating is actually kind of it's kind of an entry level job actually, and you'll be flying little planes, maybe some bush planes up in the, up off of some lakes. So these are all the little lower paying jobs, and so eventually they get to the medium ones like Jazz, WestJet. Jazz, WestJet, Encore. What else was I saying there? Bearskin. Some other little medium ones, and then they go to the big guys like Air Canada or WestJet. So the problem here is that right now there's just these guys. They're eating up all the like this fish here. He's eating up all the pilots. They're getting all of those. These guys here are they're still getting the pilots from this little pool, but the problem is that there's just not enough of these little guys. So what happens if you don't have enough of the smaller fish? Okay, that means you got less capacity there if you got less of the smaller fish. And then so you got to get another fish here. So okay, what am I getting at talking about fish and airplanes, right? So what we can do is we'll go back to the way it was before. 3, 4. Now, what we could do, because there's a shortage here and it's tough, they got to cancel flights and everything like that. What if they could buy some more airplanes, or there's another airline that comes in here, or this one expands into another one? Look at those great fish, but you don't have anything to feed it. So the key is down here. We're going to create some more little fishes here with my little idea. Ding, ding. More commercial pilots, fresh out of school. more flight instructors, and then that'll keep this all good, and everyone's all happy. Now this is going to take a few years, but the solution is in Ontario. It's not a solution, but it's a step in the right direction, I think. Is there's a yeah. So, anyways, oh, and hey, Shecky. Yeah. So the private, okay, there's this thing called the Private Career Colleges Act. Okay, now that was passed by the Ontario government about 2005, I think it was. And what happened there is they were having a problem with Joe's Trucking School or Mary's hairdressing, whatever. And people were going in, they're plunking down a whole bunch of money, and then to take the courses. And then the place went out of business, and everybody lost their money that paid their tuition. So they came up with this way of kind of weeding out the shady operators there, and they lumped in flight schools with that. So there were flight schools around that were teaching commercial pilots and flight instructors, but they're not allowed to do that anymore. As a result of that legislation that was passed, there was a few smaller flying clubs and smaller businesses that went out of business, because if you're going to be getting a commercial license, now they could maybe still teach a private pilot license, but they had to get certified by the private career college people, and that was a whole lot of reporting your books. It's very expensive to bring a third-party auditor in to audit your books every year. And it was just like the margins are so tight in aviation that, the profit margin's not there. They're going to be out of business. So that happened, and a bunch went. So that's kind of part of the reason now that there's just not enough places that can train pilots. There are some that are still training private pilots, but they're not allowed to under the legislation. They can't train commercial pilots, but it's like that's only in Ontario. All the rest of Canada, it's fine. It's just the way it always was. So I think when the government was putting that in back in the day, they kind of didn't really look at how aviation is regulated federally. And there's generally a lot of oversight by Transport Canada. So the shady operators, they get caught doing maintenance, going cheap on maintenance, or working their pilots too much, going over their duty days and stuff. So it's so my little solution here is we'll say a little bit good about the private career college people. They have managed to keep there was a there was a flight school that they actually did a pretty good job with up in Ottawa Aviation Services. It was a pretty shady operation. The owner was taking a whole bunch of money and just throwing it in his pocket and not running a good business. They went out of business. And so in that case, the private career college did manage to get, I never really heard, I did a little bit of research on it, but I never really heard if they got the money back. The students did. They definitely didn't get back the room and board or transportation to get there if they're from another country. So that you don't get all your money back. And it's like that was one place that they caught out of, 15 years of being around. So how effective is it? I don't know. There's I think shady businessmen are always going to find a way of doing shady stuff. So I mean, the private career college is there, but for how long and for how tight the aviation industry is in Canada, I'm not really sure it's so necessary, because you know who the bad operators are. Everybody does once you get into it. So so the private career college people from the legislation that was passed back there put the little guys out of business and limited the growth of other smaller flight schools. So my solution here is, and hey Vanessa, we see you in there too. So my solution here is all they have to do is that they don't have to, the Ontario government doesn't have to change the act at all or anything, but all they have to do is provide an exemption for flight schools. And so what that would do is that would free up all of the smaller flight schools that have still survived all this, and the smaller flight schools can start pumping out commercial pilots and flight instructors, and then that feeds the industry. Now, Ontario is the most populous Canadian province. It's absolutely gigantic if you ever try to drive through it, and so there's most of the flight training right now, because of the way that was set up. It had to concentrate into the larger centers, the larger cities, the busier airports. So the flight instruction it's not necessarily better at a bigger airport. You can be efficient and get more students through at a smaller airport, actually. Less taxi time, stuff like that, and less transition flying to the practice area. So anyways, I think that's all they got to do is just the Ontario government does a little exemption. Flight schools are exempt. And then now all that third party, super expensive auditing doesn't have to go on. There was a bunch of other stuff in there that it was actually, because I had to deal with that where I used to work. And you got to make up little certificates and little contracts and all this stuff. But it doesn't really apply with the aviation industry. And even when I was talking to somebody from the ministry, she was saying, well, what do you guys do about this? And I was like, we don't have to, because we're regulated federally. We don't have to make rules about that. The federal government makes the rules. Transport Canada sets those rules. So we don't need this. And so it was kind of like an apples and oranges. I don't know, like a duplication of layers of bureaucracy that really wasn't quite necessary. And I think a simple exemption. Flight schools are exempt, boom, and just watch all the flying schools just take off, and I think it'll be great. But that's all you got to do. And then I think for the businesses, if they see this, they might be a little bit wary and say, oh, okay, they can pull this exemption away anytime they want to. So you could say you could give the exemption immediately tomorrow, and then that gets the ball rolling. And then to look at reforming the Private Career Colleges Act in the future, something like that. And so anyways, it's you want to get those more fish, you probably grab another 100 pilots a year out of Ontario. Go figure that way. And then I would say that it would probably clear itself up. Eventually the problem is going to clear itself up one way or another. But with all these baby boomers retiring, and that's another thing too, is that these baby boomers that are retiring now, they got time and money to learn how to fly. A lot of them started back in the 80s, and when they had before they got married and stuff, a lot of them are coming back. So there's that demand too. And they want to fly down to Florida and Arizona every winter. So it's like a simple little exemption from Ontario could really help out the whole aviation industry, and maybe those boomers don't have to sit around and get their flights canceled. So that is my little solution. Just we'll see if it works. See if anyone wants to do it. I think it's pretty simple, and it doesn't cost any money really. So just a little video today, and I'll go through the little comments here and see if anybody's got any questions or interesting comments. And okay, and Dan guessed right off the bat, automatons. Having robots fly planes. If it's cheaper to have a robot fly a plane and they do a better job, robots will be flying the planes. That's what they do here in Windsor at the Chrysler plant for sure. I know I've talked to a few engineers that work there, and they have it. Every position on the assembly line, they make the Chrysler Pacifica here, the minivan, and so every little position on the line, they have a number for that. How much does it cost for this? How much does it cost per hour for the wages, benefits, medical issues? Okay, somebody here using this air gun, they 1 out of 5 of them get carpal tunnel in 2 years. It's just like they got that all figured out. And then they say, okay, how much is the robot to replace this job? And then if it's cheaper to have the robot, that job's eliminated, and they stick a robot in and they do that. So Yeah, and so I mean, that's going to be for every industry. They even got the robot McDonald's down in Texas or something like that, I heard. So for little tiny airplanes, and you're up in the bush and you're flying off the water, or you're at smaller airports without really good navigation aids, you're still going to need a cheap pilot there. But I don't really see the robots being able to handle that yet, and it'd be expensive. So, okay, Dan, good guess, but no robots flying planes just yet. So here we go, and we got some. Jordan seems to think I need a bigger whiteboard. What do you mean, man? That's an awesome whiteboard. It's like the perfect size. I just have to become a better artist. That's all. Okay, and here we go. What else we got here? Everybody saying hi to each other. Yeah. Okay. Oh, look at this. Here we go. Oh, we got okay, a question here from Mona Moore. Would you see more training opportunities for pilots in smaller communities without this act? Not having to move to a large city for training would be a plus, I would think. Definitely. I can think of a few flight schools right now that would, you see, that's one of the things. It's very expensive to become a commercial pilot. And so if you're living in a smaller, more remote community, or not even remote, but just like a smaller community where, okay, you can still, say you're 20 or you're 19 and you're learning how to fly, you can still have your part-time job, live at home, and then fly at your local airport. Well, those people now, they're kind of being excluded from the industry because, like, say, if you're way up north, or even like somewhere like Red Lake or something, closer to native reserves, and that if they got to go all the way to Thunder Bay or Toronto and pay, extreme rent in Toronto, or even Windsor here, it's getting like pretty expensive for rent. Yeah, that's a real deterrent from people from the smaller areas in the, I wouldn't say remote, but yeah, the smaller areas that would like to become commercial pilots. And that opportunity is not right there because the private career college is getting in the way, which is kind of ironic, actually. So I would agree, Mona Moore, that the not having to move to a large city for training would be a plus, and definitely. Okay. And and Wrench here, he runs a high school robotics team. Yeah, if you see Wrench's HRENCH, he's got a YouTube channel, and you can see his students that he works with. Anyways, that they make all these robots and they do these competitions. It's kind of cool to see these things go around. And so he likes robots as a hobby, but doesn't trust them for his life. Okay. Okay. And Vanessa is telling me a story here on the Galaxy the C5 Galaxy that I won't repeat because I don't want to get any pilots in trouble. Okay, and thanks for the heads up there, Jordan, on the other stuff. Okay, cool. That is about it. So hopefully, anybody, if you know anyone in Ontario, spread it around. I'm going to be putting this on Twitter and just kind of see if the tweets get around, and maybe we can get some more pilots into the industry. I think the more flying around, the better. And a final little note is that if you are going to be learning how to fly, generally the rule of thumb is whoever asks, like, the more money that's asked from you right at the beginning, the shadier the operation is. So most ethical, good operations will just have it where you pay as you go. And you might have to pay for ground school in advance or something, but per hour flying of the airplane, you're done your flight, you pay. You're done your flight, you pay. And that's the way the most ethical flight school runs. Some of them have other rules, so you might have to throw a little bit of a deposit down for insurance purposes, or for just to see, maybe they're really busy and they want to know if you're really interested. But if someone says, hey, give me $120,000 and I'm going to get you an ATPL. They're lying and they're going to steal your money. So in Canada, anyways, and that's where a lot of people get stuck. Or it could be even, and there used to be in the old days, there was a company that was hiring, they were teaching a bunch of Chinese guys how to fly. And what they would do is there'd be some organization over in China, and they'd say to the family, like usually it was like poor people out in the out in the countryside, and they'd say, okay, sign this contract here. We're going to take your kid and we're going to bring him over to Canada. We're going to train him up to be a pilot, and then he can work for us and pay off the debt at our airline. And then so they're like, whoa, this is a ticket out of working in the poor countryside in China. So the kid comes over here, but the catch is, if the kid fails, then we get to take your farm. So these kids were so stressed out doing flight tests and stuff. It's like, if I fail, my parents are losing the family farm that's been there for like 500 years. So not cool. But the thing is, even the private career college here in Ontario couldn't do anything about that when it happened, because there was a contract signed in China, and there you go. It has got nothing to do with Ontario law. And so some kids were failing out and losing the farm. So not right, but kind of scammy. But so the private career college is a good idea for some industries, but not necessarily for aviation, especially now with our shortage going on. So anyways, so that's about it. Today is Wednesday. Oh, it's the beginning of February. Hey, around where I am, that's about another month of winter, and usually in March around here it starts getting up above freezing every day, so that's pretty good. And what are we going to do? We're going to shut her down there. So see you on Friday, because I do this Monday, Wednesday, Friday at noon Eastern. And like I said, we'll shut her down. And thanks for watching. Bye.